Joe Crowley, the chair of the Democratic Caucus. There we go. Representing the 14th Congressional District in Queens and Bronx, New York. We had a very heartfelt welcome this morning for two women returning, one returning to the House, the other for the first time speaking for the Democratic Caucus. Two women who have been vilified by our president in one form or another. Frederica Wilson from Florida was welcomed back with open arms this morning after a difficult week and a half, to say the least, after she was vilified by the president and by the president's chief of staff. And we have, fortunate this morning to be joined by the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico, Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz, who stood up in those waist-deep waters, calling out for help from her government, our government, the United States of America, to help the people of Puerto Rico. And we'll hear from the mayor and both Chairman, Ranking Member Thompson, Benny Thompson, and Representative Luis Gutierrez momentarily. I also will let you know we had a very frank and honest discussion about where we are in regards to the Republican tax plan. The tax cut that they're proposing. Apparently, the Republicans themselves are in disarray. They're in disarray and dysfunctionality because this tax plan goes to the heart of the middle class. It will gut the middle class and working people in this country if this tax plan, as they have proposed, goes through. It will cut Social Security, it will cut Medicare, and it will cut Medicaid. And they will do it on the backs of the middle class and working people in this country. And that is so clear, they can't even let you know what's in the bill today. They're postponing it to at least tomorrow. And the question is to whether or not they can actually get the votes to pass it out of the Ways and Means Committee. Remains to be seen. That's the level of dysfunctionality they're at. Their big chance, their big opportunity to do something this year in their tax cut is really run aground at the moment. But I do want to welcome now to the microphone, I think a hero to all the Democratic Caucus and really to Americans at large, and that is the mayor of San Juan. She has stood up to the mighty forces that she ought not to have stood up to. They ought to have been there to help her, and instead she had to call them out. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulín Cruz. Yeah, Mayor. Yeah.
Yeah, so
you
they
can.
can see me. Thank you very much, Representative Crowley, and thank you, Luis, my brother, and Espaillat, and thank you very much, Mr. Thompson, for your generosity and for your ability to be able to listen to people and to hear the truth. As you know, there was a meeting scheduled today, which was canceled just when I got to Washington, D.C., we got the news that it was canceled. It was evident that this administration does not want to listen to the truth and does not want to own up to it. The federal government's response to Puerto Rico's tragedy and humanitarian crises has been inadequate, has been insufficient, and plainly it has been a way for the Trump administration not to comply with their moral obligation to help the people of Puerto Rico. The situation is still a life or death situation. Yesterday, General Buchanan, the man charged by the president of going there and coordinating all the efforts, have said that despite the statistics, the majority of the people in Puerto Rico do not have drinkable water. They may have water, but it's not good for themselves. So we know that certain things need to be done, and they need to be done quickly. One, we need to be treated by the Trump administration with dignity. Two, the Act Jones, at least for the next 4 years, when it comes to humanitarian ships that come into Puerto Rico, must be voided. It was voided for 7 days for Irma and 10 days for Maria. That wasn't enough to get the help that we needed for Puerto Rico. Three, there needs to be a comprehensive plan for Puerto Rico that touches on energy and education and healthcare. But it cannot be a plan that takes us back to the 1950s and that says that things ought to be rebuilt up to those standards. We need to reform and reshape our society, because no longer we will be able to hide inequality and poverty behind palm trees nor piña coladas. 4, we need to make sure that municipalities are empowered with the money in order to help their constituents. $350 million were taken away from all the municipalities by the Fiscal Control Board that Promesa put into place. And Promesa is killing the people of Puerto Rico because it's taking the money to pay the debt. President Trump, at the beginning of this crisis, was very, very interested in the debt, and he was not doing the job to eliminate the deaths. But our voices will not be silenced. So I want to thank Congressman Thompson for making sure that we were here today to speak the truth. Now, the Trump administration cannot handle the truth. They want to embellish it. They want to do a different story. Well, the story is not a good news story. It is a life and death story. And survival cannot be our new way of life. We need to ensure that we have economic development in Puerto Rico so that the thousands of Puerto Ricans, more than 100,000 that have left the island in the past month, have a home to come back to. Just a few words in Spanish. Gracias al congresista Thompson por la oportunidad de venir aquí a la capital federal a expresarme y en realidad hacer el eco de las voces de miles de puertorriqueños que saben que no fuimos atendidos con la dignidad, el respeto y la eficiencia de la que es capaz o debería ser capaz el gobierno federal. El presidente Trump se ha dedicado a insultar a los puertorriqueños, a tirarnos papel toalla, a llamarnos ingratos, a hablarnos de la deuda en vez de hacer su trabajo. Solamente ayer el general Buchanan, la persona a quien él nombró para coordinar, dijo que aunque las estadísticas dijeran lo contrario, la mayoría de la gente en Puerto Rico todavía no tiene agua potable. FEMA tuvo que admitir ayer, él no me quiso ver hoy, Brooke Long, pero tuvo que admitir ayer que al principio la respuesta no fue la adecuada. Bueno, todavía la respuesta no es la adecuada. Necesitamos varias cosas de inmediato. Número 1, un plan comprensivo que toque en educación, toque seguridad, toque el sistema de salud y el sistema energético, que nos permita diversificar la energía para utilizar más energía solar y salir de la adicción a la energía fósil y convertirnos en una isla que pueda utilizar el sol y el viento como medio de energía. Necesitamos que las leyes de cabotaje, el Jones Act, sea por lo menos por los próximos 4 años, comencemos a dar todos los barcos que lleguen con ayuda humanitaria a Puerto Rico, que estén exentos para que el mundo entero pueda traer la ayuda que necesitamos con tanta insistencia. Necesitamos también que la Junta de Control Fiscal, que subyuga a los puertorriqueños en dominación financiera por promesa, le devuelva $350 millones que le quitó a los municipios y a las ciudades que ahora necesitamos para salvar las vidas de nuestra gente. Y necesitamos que el pueblo de Estados Unidos sepa que nosotros reconocemos la diferencia entre un pueblo con un corazón grande y un presidente con una boca muy grande. We need the American people to know that we know the difference between the people of the United States that have a great heart. More than 500 union brothers and sisters have been in San Juan and in 34 other communities. AFL-CIO, SEIU, UFCW, the Teamsters, the machinists, the teachers, the union nurses, to help. Because we know the American spirit is all about having a big heart and keeping the moral imperative of helping those that are in need. But while the American people have had a big heart, President Trump has had a big mouth. And he has used it to insult the people of Puerto Rico. So I am here to say what I was going to say at that hearing that they seemed not to want to hear. Mr. Trump, do your job. Lives are at stake. This is not about politics. This is not about your ego. This is about the people of Puerto Rico and the people of USVI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Before I turn to Ben Thompson, let me just say I know that Benny is working on a number of issues, not the least of which is what happened in New York just yesterday evening. And our thoughts and prayers to the victims and their families, as well as I want to mention Police Officer Ryan Nash, the individual, the police officer who apprehended the perpetrator of this terrorist act. And it was in the sites just adjacent to Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, in view of where the 9/11 attack took place 16 years ago. And we want to thank our first responders for how quickly they were able to respond. But 8 people were killed and more were injured. And our hometown was hit again. But Benny Thompson is our man here in D.C. to continue to ensure the safety of the American people when it comes to homeland security and to respond to a natural disaster like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Benny.
Thank you, Joe. Let me say to the people of New York, our hearts and sympathies go out to the unfortunate tragedy that occurred yesterday and continues today. We continue to support them in every way we can. With respect to what we are faced here with Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, our responsibility under the Department of Homeland Security is not only respond to terrorist attack, but also natural disasters. We're dealing with natural disasters in Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, but everyone knows without a shadow of a doubt that there's been a difference in the response. Puerto Rico and Virgin Island response is substantially different than in Texas and Florida. But everyone impacted, they're American citizens. If we can send people to the moon and bring them back, surely we can get water to citizens, we can get the lights turned on in a timely manner, and not go through the excuses. So part of what we were scheduled to do today was to look from an oversight perspective what was going on. We were fortunate to get the mayor of Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico, to come and offer personal testimony of what occurred. At the last moment, when she had boarded the plane to come to the hearing, it was canceled. And so while the FEMA administrator is testifying on the Hill yesterday, today, tomorrow, for whatever reason, Chairman McCall canceled the hearing. And so the people of this country, as well as Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, really are still left in a lurch as to why things are not working like they should. The president talks about draining the swamp. Well, if you believe a 2-person company can get the lights on in Puerto Rico, then I have some beachfront property in Bolton, Mississippi. I'll sell you real cheap. So the notion is we have to get it done. We had the mayor of the largest city as our witness, who could be very helpful in this matter. And the hearing was canceled. Now, I'm not talking about the mayor's size, but how can you be afraid of a mayor of Puerto Rico, San Juan? And so I hope that we can reschedule this hearing to get to the facts. Because at this point, the lights are not on, the drinking water is not drinkable, the roads in many instances are still impassable, and everybody is pointing the finger. And so part of this hearing today would have gotten through some of what we've been hearing and gotten to the facts. But unfortunately, the hearing was canceled. Mayor, we sorry that you made a trip for naught, but I know your heart and the heart of all the people assembled, as well as those who are in the Democratic Caucus, continue to be with you. We'll stay with you till the end. At this point, we're going to call on the Republican leadership to step forward on behalf of the American citizens and do what's right. Help. Thank you.
Thank you, Benny. I want to turn to Luis Gutierrez from Chicago, someone who spent just about every weekend over the past month or so in Puerto Rico. And as well, I want to recognize Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, as well as Congressman Adriano Espiat, who are here as well and will participate in the questions and answers. But I'll turn it to Luis.
Thank you. First, I want to say to two men that are here, Chairman Crowley of the Democratic Caucus and our ranking member, Thompson of Homeland Security, thank you. Thank you for giving voice to a woman who stood up to power and spoke to power, and who has been marginalized, attempted to be marginalized, and demonized and belittled. But the two of you understood that she was a true voice for justice in Puerto Rico. So I want to say a personal thank you to both of you on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico, because it's an important voice and one that everyone should listen to. When she said Puerto Rico was dying and was in need of help, she was right. And 6 weeks later, we have yet, as a nation, to respond. The richest, most powerful nation in the world, and there are still babies without formula. And there are still people that don't have insulin and refrigeration. There are still people who are dying of AIDS and can't get to their medicine. And there are still hospitals that are going to be on the verge of collapse because they continue to run on generation systems. And so I want to say thank you, Mayor, for coming and speaking to us. And again, a special thanks to the chairman of the caucus for opening up the Democratic Caucus to you. Because I think you represent, not only in this instance, the best values of the Democratic Caucus, but you also represent them in terms of our goals of social justice. You fight against poverty, you fight against discrimination against our gay community, you fight for a clean environment, you fight for collective bargaining rights for our workers. You're the epitome of what we should all attempt to be as good Democrats and as good Americans. So I am so thankful to these gentlemen for allowing you. And I know that Benny Thompson is going to make sure that you get to speak, just as our chairman allowed you the opportunity to speak today. Very quickly, tomorrow, Chairman Crowley and the Democratic leadership, after the Democratic meeting, we are all going to have a day of solidarity with the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, the Democratic Caucus. So we invite you to come again. As I'm sure the chairman will get the word out to you, as all the Democrats will join together. And my hope is that Carmen Yulín Cruz, the mayor of San Juan, I hope your flight is later in the day tomorrow so that you can once again join us on the steps of the Capitol tomorrow. Let me just say in Spanish very quickly. Congresista Espaillat ha ido conmigo ya en 2 ocasiones. Él no es puertorriqueño, pero ha demostrado una gran solidaridad con el pueblo puertorriqueño, y quiero darle mi más profunda agradecimiento a mi hermano. Voy por mi tercera visita esta vez, y gracias, alcaldesa, por presentarme y introducirme a la alcaldesa de Loíza. Voy a regresar a Jayuya, y para que sepan, bipartita, porque Carmelo Ríos, el líder de la mayoría en el Senado, está haciendo todas las gestiones para garantizar que yo puedo llegar allí con la ayuda a Jayuya este domingo. El sábado voy a ir a Caguas y el domingo vamos a regresar a Loíza a empezar a reconstruirla con un dinero que se trae del pueblo puertorriqueño de Chicago a Loíza. Así que vamos a continuar. I just want to end with this. Chairman Crowley is making sure that when we go, they are not day visits. It's okay to do day visits, but they really don't allow you as members of Congress to fully impact. So the chairman is encouraging every member of the House, when they go, to get off the airplane, to go to the villages, to go to the streets and to visit and talk to the people of Puerto Rico so that we can continue to tell you about the trials and tribulations and the thirst for justice that our community needs so much. Así que gracias, porque vamos a continuar hasta que este caucus garantiza que Puerto Rico tenga la ayuda que necesita y que merece. Porque vamos a ser claros, los aviones quizás no han llegado con todo lo que necesitamos, pero yo sé que cada vez que había un avión del gobierno de Estados Unidos para llevar soldados a Vietnam, estaba lleno. A Corea estaba lleno. Segunda Guerra Mundial estaba lleno. Siempre había aviones para llevar a los soldados puertorriqueños en momentos de conflicto. Ahora es momento de traer esos aviones con la ayuda que corresponde al pueblo de Puerto Rico, porque nosotros hemos pagado el impuesto más caro, que es el impuesto de la vida y de la sangre a este país. Gracias.
Thank you, Luis. And with that, we'll open up to questions. Yes.
María Peña del diario La Prensa de Nueva York. A la alcaldesa, por favor, ¿cómo explica usted? Dice que no se debe politizar la crisis en Puerto Rico, pero el gobernador se ha reunido con el presidente Trump y ha elogiado los esfuerzos de FEMA y de toda la administración en la respuesta a Puerto Rico. Entonces, de hecho, sí se ha politizado y, bueno, él ya cesó los ataques contra usted personalmente, pero insisten en que la administración se merece un 10 por la respuesta. Bueno, si es un 10 de 100, si es un 10 de 100, que quiere decir que la incapacidad está a flor de piel, claro que se merece un 10 de 100. Sí, porque él vive, porque el presidente Trump vive en una realidad alternativa. Vive en una realidad alternativa que no es la realidad que quiere ver. Y mientras nosotros estamos dándole de comer a nuestra gente, él está en Mar-a-Lago jugando golf. Y de eso es de lo que se trata. Yo creo que el gobernador ha tratado de hacer lo mejor que puede con lo que tiene, pero ya ha comenzado a ver, y en el día de ayer ya comenzó a exigirle al cuerpo de ingenieros y a decirle que no estaban haciendo lo que le dijeron que iban a hacer. ¿Cuál es el cronograma para la reconstrucción de Puerto Rico? ¿Cuánto el mínimo, digamos, o un rango de tiempo para la reconstrucción? Bueno, Puerto Rico nunca va a ser el mismo. Y yo personalmente, en vez de hablar de reconstruir, hablo de reformar. Rather than saying reconstruction, I say rethink, reshape, and reform, because the reality will never be what it was before. Pero de inmediato, y se puede hacer con paneles solares. La compañía Tesla fue a Puerto Rico e hizo una labor humanitaria en el Hospital del Niño y colocó paneles solares en todo el techo del hospital. Así es que hay cosas como las escuelas, como los paneles solares que se pueden poner en hospitales para que esos servicios básicos comiencen de inmediato a funcionar. Otra cosa que les tengo que decir, ha habido ya reuniones y quisiera utilizar esta oportunidad para pedirle al caucus demócrata que indague sobre eso, donde Housing and Urban Development le ha dicho a la gente que comenzando en diciembre, si no tienen agua y no tienen energía eléctrica, le van a quitar los subsidios. So, members of HUD administration have been going to different places in San Juan and telling administrators that if their buildings do not have electricity or do not have water by December, that they are going to be losing the subsidies. Eso lo que va a hacer es acrecentar la crisis humanitaria y acrecentar ya, estamos al borde de una crisis de salud. La sarna humana, la gastritis, la conjuntivitis, han habido muertes por leptospirosis ya. So we're on the verge also of a health crisis because scabies, gastritis, conjunctivitis, and you say, well, gastritis is an everyday type of ailment. But if you're dehydrated and you don't have the appropriate medication, you're going to die, especially if you are in a population that is at a disadvantage, the elderly, the children, the AIDS population. Así es que ciertamente la reconstrucción de Puerto Rico tiene que ser por etapas. Y tiene que ser mirando las prioridades. Si no tenemos energía eléctrica, el motor económico del pueblo puertorriqueño no va a comenzar a moverse. El viejo San Juan, por ejemplo, es la meca del turismo en Puerto Rico. So you have to move energy to those areas which will help you provide food, provide health services, provide education, and the crises cannot be used for taking away union rights. The crisis cannot be used to allow for corruption, as in Whitefish, because given a $300 million contract to a two-man company in Montana, hey, somebody had to usher them in. They must have had a godfather or a godmother. And when I called for transparency, you know what they did? They tweeted saying that they were going to take the workers that they had in San Juan. So when you feel so empowered and you're a small company from Montana to threaten elected officials, it's because you have a godfather or a godmother somewhere.
Yes, in the back. Yep.
Congressman Crowell, in from New York City. I was hoping to get your response to the president describing the attack as, or blaming the attack on the current immigration system. He says there needs to be a change, and he says the terrorists came into the country through what's called the diversity visa lottery program, a Chuck Schumer beauty.
Well, I think the president needs to act appropriately and behave appropriately as well. We lost 8 Americans yesterday in New York City. Those were Americans who were killed by a terrorist. And what I would suggest is that Democrats and Republicans want to keep Americans safe. This is not a partisan issue. This is really an issue. This is an issue for not just New Yorkers. It's for all of us. And find ways to bring us together during this difficult time, during this time of hardship for those 8 families. This is not time for political gamemanship. This is not a time to cast aspersions or blame. We are a diverse country. We are a proud, diverse country. And we have kept Americans safe in many respects, overwhelmingly, and in New York. And I want to thank again the NYPD and the FDNY and the first responders and Officer Nash for responding so quickly. Yes, 8 people died and dozens were injured, but we think of how much more damage could have been done. For the president to use this opportunity to attack Senator Schumer is really, it's unbelievable when people have lost their lives that this is what the country has come to. And that's my response to that. Yes, Deirdre.
Have authorities determined that the suspect did enter into the diversity visa lottery program? And is this something that Congress should take a look at? It was part of the Gang of 8 bill,
I cannot verify or give certitude to as to whether or not the gentleman entered the country through the diversity visa program. What I think we all want to do as Americans, and I'm going to let Benny Thompson respond as well as the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee, is we want to protect Americans. We want to protect everyone who's here in this country. As someone who has personal loss from 9/11, I speak to this, and not just in my cousin, but in people that I knew and loved that were killed that day. I think we all, Democrat, Republican, need to come together and do as much as we can to protect the American citizens and at the same time protect their rights as Americans and the freedoms that we've loved and cherished. We cannot change who we are as a nation because that's exactly what the terrorists want us to do. Benny?
Well, the only part is there's nothing that's come out officially to this point. The challenge, I think, is to let the authorities do their job. The tweeting and other things just adds to the confusion. Let the professionals do what they do best. And that's what we're saying to the president is let's get to the bottom of what's going on. And then whatever comes out of those investigations, we will address it. I don't think this Congress or any other Congress would not fix something that's obviously wrong. But I look at what happened in Las Vegas in terms of the shootings, and there should have been some fixes put in place real quick behind that. But we get a tweet less than 24 hours on this situation, but when it's something that's done by an American citizen, there appears to be a double standard in the tweeting. So let's fix whatever is wrong rather than try to divide us based on race, religion, nationality, or those other things.
Mayor Christie. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle up here have called for a long-term recovery effort in Puerto Rico to include modernization of the electricity grid, whether that be through microgrids or just generally a more diversified grid with renewable power. I'm just wondering what you see as your priorities in that respect, and then also, Congressman Crowley, if you could address when maybe that long-term effort may bear fruit.
Well, a couple of things. One, the priority, of course, is to get power back. Why? Because we're not talking about having power for having air conditioning or having hot water. We're talking about power to be able to operate in the operating rooms in the Puerto Rican hospitals. We're talking about power to be able to have our children go to school. So there are basic needs that need to be met when you have power. But microgrids, especially if they are solar powered, are an option which is readily available. So we would like to see in San Juan, and many mayors would like to see around the island nation of Puerto Rico, is that those microgrids come together with a diversification of the energy sources so that solar power is used and that we can use this opportunity. And I would have loved for this opportunity never to come, because I would have loved for this devastation never to take place. But we can use this opportunity in order to do the right thing. For example, FEMA will pay for a house whose roof was made of zinc to be put back also from zinc. Well, what's going to happen is with the next tropical storm, the next 125 mile per hour winds, it's going to blow away. So climate change is real. We live in a tropical island. Yes, we are surrounded by water, lots and lots of water. And we also get lots and lots of hurricanes. So we need to rebuild, not to 1950 standards, but to the 21st century standards. So diversification of energy is most important and most needed, and microgrids, especially for communities, to be able to, so to speak, unplug themselves from the main grid and be able to be energy sustainable.
Mayor, can I follow up on that?
I think the
Well, let me just
Crowley.
say, I think the issue at hand in some regards is the Stanford Act, and I'll have to review it myself to fully understand whether there's a waiver possibility or not. But I think the mayor has answered the question quite correctly. We ought not to be looking towards just reestablishing what was 1950 or 1930 technology in the 21st century to deal with resiliency in light of the fact that this is not going to be the only storm that Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands will see. We suspect, because of global warming, that they're going to be seeing on a yearly basis, hopefully not Category 4 or 5, but it may possibly happen again. Is there the resiliency that will be built into the reconstruction there to protect the grid and the deliverability of power, and what is directly connected to that is clean water, the pumping of that water? That's what I think we need to address long term. Yeah, please.
I just want to add to that this is not just simply a debate about energy. This is a debate about life and death. I was with the mayor a week into the storm, after the storm, and we visited a hospital that lost its generator, right? There was about 41 patients, if I remember correctly there. 11 of them were on ventilators. She had to rush out there to get the ambulances lined up to get those folks, mainly seniors, very frail, elderly, to other hospitals. So the children have not gone back to school. They're about to lose a school year because the schools don't have any energy. So this is really a life and death question, and a question about the quality of life and the future of the people of Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico has to reinvent itself in a resilient way, in a way that this won't happen again. Puerto Rico and the Caribbean are on the pathway of storms. 4 storms hit the area around the Caribbean this hurricane season, and we cannot guarantee that that's unfortunately will not happen again. So this is a real, the energy issue, which also touches on the quality of the water. And the Congressman Gutierrez and I were in Comerío, where we saw a man in a stream with untreated sewage water. And so this is a real life and death discussion about energy and how we should get it there as quickly as possible.
Mayor, do you
Yes,
have
sir. Go ahead.
Mayor, do you have a clear idea of who's in charge of restoring power? Is it the Army Corps of Engineers? Is it PREPA? Does there need to be a better organization of this?
Yes, there needs to be a better organization, and it should be PREPA. There is no reason why the people of Puerto Rico will be unable to do this if they are provided the tools in order to do it. And I think what Representative Crowley and Gutierrez are talking about is true. We need a waiver of the Stafford Act in order to do things the right way and push an agenda of the future, which is today. The future is not far away. The future is today, now. But what is happening is that there's too much bureaucracy. You know, there's the Army Corps of Engineers, then there's FEMA, and you know, FEMA has the tarps. The Army Corps of Engineers has the blue roofs. And then when you ask them, well, can you give me a list of what you have? They say, no, we can't communicate with each other. So the FEMA information and the Army Corps of Engineers information, these two federal agencies can't talk to one another. And we were told that. No, we can't talk to one another because there's personal information. Well, you're the same government, so you should be capable of keeping personal information safe. Now, I don't care if it's Puerto Rican taxpayers' money or if it's U.S. taxpayers' money. It's public money, and it should be treated with the utmost respect. And I'll give you one example. We had hired independent truckers. We waited 3 weeks until FEMA was able to give us the amounts that it was going to reimburse, because all of a sudden price gouging, skyrocketed. What they cost $35 a pound the week before now cost $135, and we weren't going to do that. So when FEMA gave us the standards, we started contracting. Well, one of those truckers, under contract with the municipality of San Juan, charge somebody. The citizen came forward. We took the appropriate sworn statements, and we are filing with Homeland Security the appropriate grievance so that that person is prosecuted. So this is what I said before. This crisis cannot be a breeding ground for corruption. Individual corruption, corporate corruption, or governmental corruption. So PREPA should be in charge. Now, the governor has appointed Samot, whom I believe is testifying next week in front of the Congress, Natural Resources Committee, to oversee everything. And the Fiscal Control Board has said just yesterday that they are going to review every contract that the central government has done in order to ensure that it is appropriately done. And frankly, that it's embarrassing to have that happen.
Yes, Mayor, did you get any offers for global relief outside of the U.S. that you had to turn away, or if you had any discussions of what you could get if you didn't have these restrictions? And could you give us an example?
Yeah,
I'd like to ask you if you have had any discussions with any forensics experts or medical experts about the deaths. Where do you think the deaths are, and have you yourself had to report any or known of deaths that were not reported?
On the first question, yes. I had a conversation with the Cuban ambassador in Washington, D.C., that wanted to make sure that the central government understood that they were able and willing to send about 60 linemen, between 60 and 80 linemen, to help in the recovery effort of the electrical grid. Of course, that had to be turned down, or at least from the municipal standpoint, the central government apparently never replied to their request. We had calls at the municipality from the governments or certain organizations, not the government, in South Africa that were willing to come and send us help, especially in the solar energy situation. And of course, 10 days weren't enough when the Act Jones was lifted in order to get that ready. And the members of the or what do you say, Uruguayan legislator were also interested in sending supplies. We also had Operación Techo, mostly from Chile and Argentina, young men and women that go back to disaster areas to rebuild home, but they need to get their visas. And what I was personally told was, well, try it, but we don't think we're going to be able to push those visas through. And we were willing to host, thank you, we were willing to host them at the municipality and ensure that they had work that needed to be done. So those are some instances of what could have been done. And again, I understand the position of our maritime union brothers and sisters. What I'm talking about as a first step is humanitarian efforts for the next 4 years to be able to be coordinated and brought into Puerto Rico.
On the deaths, can you answer the question on the deaths?
The deaths, well, we know of hospitals that don't want to report the deaths as deaths related to not having energy because they think that's going to be bad for them. But there has been reported 911 cremations in 1 month, which is an outstanding figure, much higher than we have ever seen before. Now, this is what seems to be happening, and I have no way of proving it. I am attached to the respirator, and I'm living in my house. I don't have any energy. I have a small generator. The generator goes out. I die because I can't breathe, and that it seems to be put into as a natural cause of death. Well, it is a natural cause of death, but it is attached to the fact that you had no energy and no access to oxygen or your ventilator because of the situation of the hurricane itself.
Chairman, can you clarify the debate about the staff for law required on FEMA? Because by mid of December, maybe the Congress will be approving the text supplemental and include some of those amendments. In the worst scenario, maybe the repair have gone to 50% of the island. Can they revisit the issue if they want to remake the system instead of putting in place what
I think you have two issues that really have to be addressed. One is the immediate, as quickly as possible, getting power back up and running. And we can have this debate about the resiliency issue. I think that that is important when we're talking about long-term fix. But right now, I think if you ask the average Puerto Rican or member of the a person living in the Virgin Islands, this is an esoterical debate that Congress is going to have. They want power back. They want normalcy back immediately. But I think what we need to be doing as well, simultaneously walking and chewing gum at the same time, is looking at the issue of resiliency. I had the opportunity by helicopter to see the destruction to the solar power farm, and it was devastating. The trees that were knocked down, the windmills that were destroyed. These are all issues in terms of clean energy that we're supportive of. But when something like this happens, they're obliterated. What can we do, if anything, to ensure in the future that we could, and maybe it's collapsing in terms of the windmills collapsing their blades, or finding some other way in which we can, when recreating it, do it in a way that it can be adjusted to deal with these crises. It's about getting power over line, over mountains. Are we doing it in the best way? I'm not an expert on it. We need to ensure that when we move forward, that it's done both immediately to get power back on and bring normalcy back, and looking towards the future for resiliency, so that when something like this happens again, there will be less damage to the overall grid.
But you know,
Yeah.
the American citizens living in Puerto Rico deserve the same response as American citizens in Texas and Florida. There are Mississippi landmen in Massachusetts and the East Coast right now. They got dispatched yesterday because of the windstorm. So in 2 days, we have linemen working in the United States, 1,500 miles away from their home, and yet and still, here we are, arguing over when we're going to get the lights on in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Something's wrong with that. And so what the hearing today would have crystallized is somehow, through no fault of the citizens, the majority of citizens in Puerto Rico, the lights are not on, water's not being distributed, health care is marginalized, and it's our responsibility through FEMA and those entities to make it work. And it's not working. And so to whatever extent we can get it working in as fast a period of time, that's what we're trying to do. And ultimately, the long-term solution, we'll look at that. But for those individuals without running water and lights are the real reason why we're trying to bring this more of a highlight and attention with this press conference.
Before I take the last question, I just want to thank Governor Cuomo for sending additional New York linemen down as of yesterday in light of the cancellation of the Whitefish contract. Yes, sir.
Michael Labers with the Washington Blade, my question's for the mayor. Can you talk further about the situation for people with HIV/AIDS in Puerto Rico after the hurricane, and also what's being done to help LGBT Puerto Ricans and other communities that are already quite vulnerable on the island?
Yes, San Juan has an adult and pediatric AIDS clinic. We also have the only transgender clinic in all of Puerto Rico. So the one thing we did is we stacked up. We bought a lot of medication, which we may or may not be able to get reimbursed for, but who cares? We would have not been able to keep people alive if we hadn't done that. And so our AIDS clinic began, and the director of our health care system is here with me, began working immediately 2 weeks after Hurricane Maria, not at its full capacity, but at least dispensing medication to people. Because when you keep dialysis away from people, or cancer treatments or AIDS treatments, you're taking away their livelihood. So one of the things that we're doing is also we have the AIDS Foundation that has been helping. And people have been identified. In the next week, generators will be taken to the homes of the AIDS patients that need assistance in order to continue living with like oxygen and so forth. And also some food and water is being taken to their homes, or they can pick it up at the clinic when they go to receive their weekly checkups and so forth. But besides that, we have made sure that they have been called or visited to ensure of their livelihood and their safety. We're an LGBTQI sensitive community in San Juan, and we are not going to marginalize anybody, or nobody's staying behind.
Let me just thank the mayor for being here today. Really do appreciate it. And again, our thoughts and prayers with the people of Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and my brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters in New York as they work towards this tragic event. Thank you all. Thank you, Mayor.